Thank you for joining me for this month's Curators Tour. I'm Britt Mitchell, Curator of Exhibitions, and today we will be going through the American regionalism and images of the Heartland. In the 1930s and 1940s, many American artists created narratives using familiar local imagery and naturalistic style, while distancing themselves from the foreign influence of European modernist abstraction. Inspired by their Midwestern roots, painter-printmakers Thomas Hart Benton from Missouri, Steuart Curry from Kansas, and Grant Wood from Iowa frequently presented agrarian and country life in their work. Small towns and verdant farmlands populated by residents and laborers became the archetype for rural America, the Heartland. In the wake of the economic hardships of the Great Depression and Dust Bowl, their hopeful images celebrated stability, the virtue of hard work, and the nation's resilient spirit. In 1934, Benton made the cover of Time magazine for an article that described this trend as regional art, bringing national attention to the artists. Gallery owner Maynard Walker highlighted the American regionalists in the 1933 exhibition at the Kansas City Art Institute, praising their quote, art which springs from the American soil and seeks to interpret American life. At the same time, other artists used agricultural themes for different outcomes. Artists like Margaret Burroughs, Elizabeth Catlett, and Hale Woodruff expanded the historical narrative by depicting African American experiences. Floyd Hopper, Gregory Orloff, and Herman Trunk depicted farm scenes through simple, geometric forms that retained traces of Cubism's influence. Cultural traditions are often associated with the Heartland, as seen in Tree Planting Group by Grant Wood, whose most famous painting is American Gothic. Outside the schoolhouse, a teacher and classmates gather around two young boys preparing the ground for a sapling. Grant Wood reprised the lower right corner of his 1932 painting Arbor Day, celebrating the annual spring holiday. In the 50 State Quarters program, the backside of Iowa's State Quarter in 2004 features the group from this beloved painting. On April 10, 1872, Nebraska school children planted an estimated 1 million trees celebrating the first Arbor Day. Other states followed and passed legislation to observe the holiday. Besides becoming an annual tradition, Arbor Day became viewed as a patriotic duty. Although Thomas Hart Benton experimented with abstraction, the return to his home state of Missouri in 1924 inspired him to acknowledge his Midwestern heritage and focus on American rural themes. Spring Tryout recalls a childhood memory in which Benton and a friend took a horse for a bareback ride in early spring. Perhaps invigorated by the weather, the horse bolted, leaving Benton on the ground and his friend gripping the reins. The lively lines in the grass field and heavy clouds accentuate the movement in the scene. Benton used his colorful paintings for compositions in lithography. Working in black and white heightened the drama in the print. Although best known for his abstract expressionist paintings, Jackson Pollock's early plowing subject aligns with his former Art Students League teacher Thomas Hart Benton. Unlike Benton's optimistic views, Pollock's depiction is dark and haunting. The long-eared mule looks emaciated and the land is eerily sparse. In 1934, Pollock and his brother Charles drove 8,000 miles cross-country from New York to Los Angeles in a Model T Ford, camping and sketching along the way. On their return trip back east, they visited their aunt's farm in Iowa. His brother recalled, quote, "This was the year of the great Okie migration and the drought. We saw it all." Some writers suspect seeing the devastating effects of the severe drought and dust storms on the farm communities influenced Pollock's perspective in plowing. We next look at Margaret Burroughs' Cotton Needs Picking So Bad, 1954 lino cut. Margaret Burroughs' cotton harvesting scene is a busy composition made up of patterns of wide gouges and small flecks in the field, repeated thin lines in the sky, and rows of stylized cotton plants. The artist created a sense of movement through the dramatic bending and stretching of the laborers' bodies to pick the soft white balls. The history of America's cotton industry is inextricably tied to enslavement and sharecropping. Burroughs' line cut focuses on the strength and determination of the cotton-picking workers. The flowing shapes of the figures and billowing sacks belie the physical exertion, heavy weight of the cotton, and lengthy hours of harvesting season. John Rogers Cox explored the wonders of the ordinary and familiar. For him, they were cloud formations and wheat fields, taken from his memories of living in Terre Haute. The subject of summer is wheat, a common sight observed along Indiana rural roads. Cox described the wheat field as a place that, quote, has a whispering sound and an awe-inspiring quality like drifting music, and like an ocean, it gives you a lonely feeling. Despite the artist's precision, Cox's painting also takes on an abstract quality with its yellow, amoeba-shaped fields. The dark sky features a single, peculiar cloud formation. The lush, golden fields contrast with the bare trees, all set in an unnaturally still environment. The abandoned farm equipment emphasizes that there is no human presence. This predilection for mystery and foreboding is reason for associating Cox with magic realist painters. The term was used in the exhibition Americans 1943, Realists and Magic Realists, organized by the Museum of Modern Art. It described this trend towards a new objectivity in America, using an exacting technique to make plausible and convincing their improbable, dreamlike, or fantastic visions. During her time off from teaching in the summer, Betty Fishman, then Betty Edel, often designed and printed calendars as gifts. In the 1970s, the family lived north of Fort Wayne on 5 acres surrounded by a creek, wildlife, and woods. It was fondly known as Edel's Health Farm, according to her daughter Marguerite. Fishman's consummate love of nature led her to create images of animals, birds, and wildflowers in all media. Marguerite reminisced, quote, "It's natural that she chose those for many of her calendar topics. Living in rural Indiana, we were surrounded by fields of corn. Each time we drove to Grandma's house in Hicksville, we took the back roads, often stopping to get corn from the road stands." Rather than depicting a landscape in Heartland, Don Nice featured iconic American symbols of popular pastimes and food. A football, an ear of sweet corn, baseball cap, and blossoms, possibly apple, as a reference to apple pie. The artist has used this approach in other works to encapsulate famous locations or people. In each example, Nice chose meaningful objects removed from any background or context. Thank you again for joining me for this month's Curator's Tour of American Regionalism and the Images of the Heartland. If you want to see the works in person, be sure to get into the museum before July 5th when the exhibition closes.